golden days of Hollywood, there were men who thought money made them gods. Studio moguls who could end careers with a phone call, who could crush dreams with a single word. They were used to breaking spirits for sport. But on one sweltering afternoon in 1962, one of them made a terrible mistake. He picked a fight with a working man, and Gregory Peck was watching. What happened next was never reported, never confirmed, but the whispers traveled through every soundstage in town. Gregory Peck was about to risk a $20 million production to prove that a man's dignity isn't for sale.
The air in Soundstage 7 was thick that afternoon. It carried the smell of burnt coffee from the craft services table, the sharp ozone bite from banks of 10,000-watt arc lights, the particular perfume of sawdust and fresh paint from newly constructed sets, and something else. Fear. The kind of fear that made grown men look at their shoes, that made veteran cameramen suddenly find urgent business at the far end of the stage, because the Studio Mogul had arrived unannounced. Now, you have to understand something about men like him. We won't use his real name here, out of respect for those still living who remember. But every old-timer in Hollywood knew his type. He was a man who had climbed to power on a ladder built from other people's backs. A man who wore his cruelty like a silk tie, casually, expensively, and always on display. He didn't visit sets to check on production. He visited to remind everyone who owned them. On this particular day, his target was a young lighting technician named, let's call him Eddie Kowalski, 26 years old, second-generation Hollywood. His father had been a grip on silent pictures. Eddie had a wife at home, a daughter who had just turned 3, a second baby on the way. Eddie had made a mistake, a small one. During a complicated lighting setup for a crucial scene, one of his C-stands had drifted just a few inches. It cast a shadow where no shadow should be. The director noticed, called for an adjustment. That was it. In the normal course of things, it would have been fixed in 30 seconds. A gentle ribbing from the gaffer, maybe a round of beers owed after wrap. But normal things don't happen when men like the mogul are watching. You. The word cracked across the soundstage like a rifle shot. Every head turned, every conversation died. The mogul was walking now. No, stalking, cutting across the set with the predatory confidence of a man who had never been told no in his adult life. Eddie froze at his station. You could see it in his body, the way he shrank, the way his hands started trembling. "You cost me money today," the mogul said, his voice dropping to something almost worse than a shout, a conversational cruelty. "That reshoot? That's coming out of your paycheck, every penny." "Sir, Don't speak. Don't you dare speak when I'm talking." The mogul was close now, close enough that Eddie could smell the bourbon, close enough that everyone on set could see the spittle forming at the corners of the man's mouth. "You know what you are. You're a replaceable part. You're a thing. I've got 100 guys who'd kill to take your place, and every single one of them would be smarter than you." Around the stage, men and women stood paralyzed, the camera operators, the script supervisors, the makeup artists who had paused with brushes in hand. Nobody moved. Nobody ever moved, because they all knew what happened to people who crossed the mogul. The blacklists that could follow you for decades, the phone calls to every other studio in town, the slow, professional death of a Hollywood career. "You're fired," the mogul said. He said it almost casually, like he was ordering a sandwich. "Get your things, get off my lot, and if I ever see your face in this town, I'll make sure you can't get work sweeping floors at a bus station." Eddie's face crumpled, not with anger, with something worse: defeat. The complete, total surrender of a man who has just watched his future evaporate, who is thinking about his pregnant wife, about the mortgage payment due in 2 weeks, about his little girl asking why daddy isn't going to work anymore. His hand started to move toward his tool belt to begin the slow, shameful process of packing up. And that's when the voice came. If he goes, the camera stayed dark. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be, because that voice belonged to Gregory Peck. He stepped forward from the edge of the set where he had been watching the scene unfold with mounting fury hidden behind a mask of granite composure. Peck was still in partial costume, the crisp white shirt of whatever character he was portraying that day, open at the collar, his tie held loosely in one hand. He didn't hurry. He didn't need to, because every eye on that soundstage had already turned to him, and the mogul, for perhaps years, looked uncertain. Gregory Peck knew the rules of Hollywood. Lord, did he know them. He had been in the business for nearly 2 decades by then. He understood the unwritten contracts, the careful dance of power and profit, the way that stars, even the biggest stars, were ultimately employees, properties, investments that could be protected or discarded depending on the quarterly numbers. He knew you didn't cross the men who signed the checks. But Gregory Peck also remembered something else. He remembered being a young man in La Jolla, California, remembered a father who abandoned the family when Gregory was just 5 years old, remembered his mother working herself to the bone, remembered the particular shame of being the kid whose clothes were just a little too worn, whose lunch was just a little too sparse. He remembered what it felt like to be powerless. And he had made a promise to himself, somewhere along the way, that he would never, never stand by while another human being was destroyed for sport. The mogul turned to face him. You could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, the rapid mental arithmetic of power and leverage. Gregory Peck was, at that moment, one of the 3 or 4 most bankable stars in the world. The production they were shooting represented an enormous investment. Delays could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars per day. But the mogul had not built his empire by backing down. "Greg," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "this is business. I'm sure you understand. We can't have incompetent. His name is Eddie Kowalski." Peck's voice was low, controlled, but something in it made the mogul stop mid-sentence. "He's been with this crew for 3 years. His father worked on pictures with John Ford. His wife is expecting their 2nd child next month." Beat. "And he made a mistake that cost us approximately 40 seconds. The mogul's face went through several colors, red as the blood rushed up in fury, then pale, almost white, as the implications sank in, then a kind of grayish green that comes from swallowing humiliation whole. For a long moment, it couldn't have been more than 10 seconds, but to everyone watching, it felt like an hour. The 2 men simply stared at each other. It was, one witness would later recall, like watching a nature documentary. 2 apex predators sizing each other up, except one of them was fighting for territory and profit, and the other was fighting for something the mogul had never understood: principle. You could almost see the mathematics playing out behind the mogul's eyes, the cost-benefit analysis of pride versus profit. If he pushed forward, if he fired Eddie anyway, called Peck's bluff, what happened? Best case, Peck backed down, humiliated, and the mogul's dominance was confirmed. But was that likely? The set was full of witnesses. Word would spread, and Gregory Peck had never been known as a man who bluffed. Worst case, Peck walked. The production shut down. The papers picked up the story, And suddenly, the mogul was known as the man who was too petty to keep his biggest star. The accountants wouldn't like that. The board wouldn't like that. The mogul broke first.
The mogul's retreat. The retreat was magnificent. There's no other word for it. The mogul muttered something. Nobody quite heard what. It might have been a retraction. It might have been, "We'll discuss this later." It might have been nothing at all, just the sound of a man trying to save face while his power crumbled in front of 50 witnesses. He turned. He walked away. And with every step he took toward the soundstage door, the air on that set got a little easier to breathe. The crew's silent reaction. Nobody cheered. You have to understand, nobody was that foolish. The mogul might have lost this battle, but he still owned half the studio lots in town. He could still make phone calls. He could still destroy careers. So the triumph was expressed in smaller ways. A camera operator straightening his back after standing hunched for the past 10 minutes. A script supervisor exhaling a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. A group of grips exchanging glances that spoke volumes about what they had just witnessed. Eddie's moment. Eddie Kowalski was crying, silently, trying to wipe his face before anyone noticed, failing completely. He stood at his station, tool belt still around his waist, unable to move, unable to process what had just happened. His career, his livelihood, his family's future, all of it had been swinging over an abyss, and then Gregory Peck had reached out and pulled him back. Peck's approach. Peck walked over to him, slowly, giving Eddie time to compose himself, giving him the dignity of not being seen in his moment of vulnerability. When he reached the young technician, he did something remarkable. He didn't make a speech. He didn't accept gratitude. He didn't acknowledge what had just happened at all. He simply put a hand on Eddie's shoulder, a firm, warm, paternal pressure, and said, "Check your lighting, Eddie. We're losing the sun." And just like that, the set came back to life. The assistant director started calling out orders. The makeup team rushed in for touch-ups. The camera operators began their careful dance of positioning and focus. It was as if the entire confrontation had been a fever dream. Except for the way the crew looked at Gregory Peck for the rest of that shoot. Except for the story that began circulating through Hollywood that very night. Except for a young lighting technician who would name his son Gregory when the baby was born 2 months later. The mogul's aftermath. As for the mogul, he stayed away from that production for the remaining 3 months of shooting. Official explanation, other pressing business, important meetings on the East Coast, a demanding schedule that precluded set visits. Unofficial explanation, he couldn't stand to look at a soundstage where everyone knew what had happened. The balance of power hadn't changed, not really. He was still rich, still powerful, still capable of ruining lives. But now there was an asterisk next to his name. Gregory Peck made him back down. In Hollywood, where reputation is currency, that kind of asterisk never quite goes away. The silence. Here's the remarkable thing. Gregory Peck never reported the incident. He never mentioned it in interviews, never brought it up at dinner parties, never used it to burnish his own legend. When reporters asked about conflicts with studio executives, he gave diplomatic non-answers that revealed nothing. It wasn't in his autobiography. It wasn't in any authorized biography. The only reason we know about it at all is because the people who were there, the crews, the technicians, the silent witnesses, passed the story down, from father to son, from mentor to apprentice, whispered in studio commissaries and shouted in retirement toasts. Because that was the Peck way. You didn't do the right thing for credit. You didn't stand up for people so you could tell the story later. You did what was right because it was right.
and then you went back to work. What made Gregory Peck the kind of man who would risk everything for a lighting technician? The answer isn't simple, because Gregory Peck wasn't a simple man. Born in San Diego in 1916, Eldred Gregory Peck knew hardship from the beginning. His father, a pharmacist, left the family when Gregory was only 5 years old. His parents' divorce, still scandalous in that era, shaped him in ways that would take decades to fully understand. Raised primarily by his grandmother, young Gregory learned early that families could fracture, that security was never guaranteed, that the people who were supposed to protect you might simply leave. Perhaps that's why he spent his life standing up for others. Perhaps some part of him was still that abandoned 5-year-old, wishing someone, anyone, had stepped in. His rise in Hollywood in the early 1940s, Peck was nobody special, just another tall, handsome young man with dreams of stardom. But there was something different about him. Studio executives noticed it immediately. It wasn't just the famous voice, that incredible instrument that could whisper or thunder with equal effect. It wasn't just the face, those striking features that photographed like a dream. It was something behind the eyes, a depth, a seriousness, an absolute refusal to compromise on certain things. Stories accumulated over the decades. There was the time he insisted that his black co-stars receive equal billing and treatment during the making of a controversial film. There was the time he refused to sign a loyalty oath during the McCarthy era, risking his career to stand against the blacklist. There was the time he shut down a production for 3 days because a stuntman had been seriously injured, and the studio wanted to continue shooting anyway. The thread that connected them. Each of these stories, and dozens more, shared a common thread. Gregory Peck saw human beings. Not roles, not functions, not talent versus crew. He saw Eddie Kowalski with his pregnant wife and his worried eyes. He saw the stuntman with the broken collarbone and the medical bills. He saw the writers and actors whose careers were destroyed by political witch hunts, and he couldn't stand by. His philosophy. There's a quote attributed to him, though its exact origin is unclear. You can't play heroes for 40 years and not absorb some of it. Whether he actually said it or not, it captures something essential about the man. The roles he chose, Atticus Finch, the noble lawyer defending an innocent black man in a racist town, the stoic captain facing impossible odds, the principled journalist exposing corruption. These weren't just performances. They were manifestations of something already inside him. He didn't become brave by playing brave men. He played brave men because bravery was already part of his soul. Eddie's story continues. Eddie Kowalski worked in Hollywood for another 32 years. He became a gaffer, then a director of photography. By the 1980s, he was mentoring young cinematographers who would go on to shoot some of the most visually stunning films of the modern era. He never told the full story publicly, but at his retirement party in 1994, surrounded by 3 generations of Hollywood craftspeople, he raised a glass and said something that made the older attendees, those who knew the legend, go very quiet. I owe my career to a man who understood that everyone deserves dignity, no matter what their job title says. He didn't mention Gregory Peck by name. He didn't have to. Gregory. Eddie's son, Gregory, named for the man who saved his father's career before the boy was even born, became a producer. Not a major one, not a household name, but he was known for something specific in an industry not always known for kindness. He treated crew members with respect. He remembered names, asked about families, made sure the people at the bottom of the call sheet were treated like human beings. When asked about this in a 2015 interview, he smiled. "I learned it from my father," he said, "who learned it from someone else. It's a tradition in our family." This is how legacies actually work. Not through statues and award ceremonies, not through documentaries and memorial tributes, but through the quiet transmission of values from one person to another. Gregory Peck stood up for Eddie Kowalski. Eddie Kowalski raised a son with those values. That son passed them on to his children, his colleagues, his industry. And somewhere, right now, a young production assistant is being treated with dignity by someone who learned it from someone who learned it from someone who was there that day in 1962. The ripples never stop. Reflection on his meaning. Gregory Peck died on June 12, 2003. He was 87 years old. By then, he had won an Academy Award, a Presidential Medal of Freedom, and virtually every honor Hollywood could offer. But ask the old-timers, the ones who actually worked with him, and they don't talk about the awards. They talk about the man. In an industry that often rewards selfishness, he was selfless. In a world of carefully managed images, he was genuine. In a business built on illusion, he was real. He proved something that we desperately need to believe, that you can reach the absolute pinnacle of success, the biggest star in the world, the most respected actor of his generation, and still be a decent human being. Still remember where you came from. Still see the Eddie Kowalskis of the world and think, that could have been me. The engagement call. Which of his roles showed you the true meaning of integrity? Was it the quiet strength of Atticus Finch, standing alone against a town consumed by hatred? Was it the determined bravery of Captain Keith Mallory, climbing the guns of Navarone? Was it the stubborn principle of James McKay in The Big Country, refusing to fight until he had no other choice? The comment invitation. Tell us your stories in the comments. Tell us what Gregory Peck meant to you. Tell us about the times someone stood up for you, or the times you stood up for someone else, because that's how we honor him, not just by remembering the legend, but by living it. We are Starlight News, and until next time, remember, character is what you do when the cameras aren't watching. But integrity? Integrity is what you do when everyone is watching, and you do the right thing anyway. Good night.